Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Thanks for joining me for this live video. And if you are watching the replay, that's great as well. You can leave comments. I do try to come back and look at them and give you a little bit of feedback if I can. For those of you watching on YouTube, particularly for the replays, if you don't know me, my name is Barbara Heffernan, and I am an online life coach, psychotherapist, and I combine some Buddhist philosophy with some psychotherapy techniques, mindset tools, and bring all sorts of things together to try to help you live a more joyful life. So subscribe to my channel and give this video a like if you like it. And you can do that if you're on Facebook as well. So welcome, everybody. I see that Jan has joined from the UK, and Akarsh, I hope I'm saying your name right, asking a question, which I will get to. That's great. And if you're on Facebook, just a reminder that I can't see your name unless you put it in the comments, but I'll always come back to the Facebook group and read through them so I know who is commenting. So today we're going to talk about stress reduction in uncertain times. And let's just see some thumbs up if you are feeling like times are super uncertain right now. All sorts of chaos happening in the world, the pandemic impacting almost all of us very significantly. There's some civil unrest in the US, other areas of the world, of course. In the US, people are really stressed out by the upcoming election. All sorts of stuff going on. So, oops, I'm getting a bunch of thumbs up. Yes, thumbs up. Stress is way, way up there. So, hi, Elaine. Hi, Teresa. Nice to see you. Khyatishman, I hope I'm saying your name right, joining from Assam, India. Welcome. Maria, Debretta, Graciela Saul, and Rob. Hi, I haven't seen you for a while. Nice to see you, Rob. Pablo from Peru. It's great. I love the international element of doing this work online. So let's jump in and talk about this topic. And there's so many different ways to approach it. But basically what I would like to do is I'd like to talk about the stress response, because I think that once you understand the stress response, you can begin to work more firmly with how to lower the stress response, no matter what. And truly, I mean no matter what. And I'm going to actually come back, sorry, jumping around here a little bit. But the question I got from Akarsh already was, can GAD be cured? Now, GAD is generalized anxiety disorder. And the answer is yes. You can recover from generalized anxiety disorder. In fact, most anxiety disorders have a pretty good record for recovery. And it probably takes a lot of work. Probably takes a trained professional to work with you. But yes, I really, really want to communicate hope that you can recover from those. But one reason I'm bringing this up is that when I'm working with somebody who has a lot of anxiety, they will spend considerable amount of time arguing with me about why they should be anxious. And then if I work with them on tools for lowering that anxiety, they may respond as if I don't really get it, like I don't really understand how serious the problem is. So what I really want to do today is help you to understand, in my approach, and just my approach, why I believe no matter what the problem is, you can lower your stress and you can lower your anxiety response. So let me know if that sounds good to you. So we have an autonomic nervous system, and we have a parasympathetic nervous system and a sympathetic nervous system. Our sympathetic nervous system is what helps us get up in the morning. It utilizes more stress chemicals. It is activating, and our parasympathetic nervous system relaxes us, helps us fall asleep at night. And these two systems, part of our autonomic nervous system, work in balance with one another. So some stress is a normal part of life. You feel hungry. It's a little bit of a stress on the body. You go and you get food. You, even just waking up in the morning, there's a little bit of stress. It says, get up and go, time to do things. So some stress is very, very productive. In fact, we can't live without it. There's absolutely no way to live without it. The problem is when our stress response is excessive or we are continually having a stress response. So that sympathetic nervous system basically utilizes adrenaline or epinephrine and cortisol. And if we have sort of an extreme stress, something very shocking happens, our adrenaline spikes. And then right after the adrenaline spike, cortisol kicks in to kind of bring that adrenaline down. So pretty much adrenaline spikes, cortisol comes up, starts to help that adrenaline come down, and then cortisol goes down. So that would be a normal response to, a significant stressor. And that kind of response helps us to run fast, act very, very quickly, think very quickly, although not always completely accurately, but it is a fight, flight, or freeze response. Now, if we are habitually stressed, if we just have many, many, many major stressors coming at us, our adrenaline goes up, our cortisol comes up to bring the adrenaline down. The adrenaline begins to fall. Before the cortisol falls, the adrenaline comes back up. And so the cortisol never gets a chance to go down. And I'm hoping that my fingers show on the screen, because it would be nice to show this with a chart. But since I'm live, I'm just using my hands. But pretty much your adrenaline comes up, your cortisol comes up to bring the adrenaline down. Before the adrenaline gets down too far, another shock to the system, another shock to the system, another shock to the system, and the cortisol never comes down. And elevated cortisol levels are tied to all sorts of major diseases, major physical diseases. Elevated cortisol is really being noticed in the last few years as something that is incredibly damaging to our long-term health. So that's part of what's needed to understand this. I'm just going to quickly check comments. So Elaine shared that on Facebook, the video wasn't working so well, so she switched to YouTube. Everybody can do that if that's the case. And Chara is a stress shooting RN. Yes, so when you work in nursing, like there's a lot of these shocks to the system and a lot of true situations that need that kind of adrenaline spike and very, very, very quick action. Yes. So the other piece to understand with this stress cycle is that we get that stress, that kind of biochemical hormonal cycle happens in us, even when the stress is not something that requires it. So you have a fight with your spouse, your loved one, your boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, close friend, family member. And if the fight is serious enough and you feel really threatened by it, you will have that adrenaline and cortisol spike, even though you are physically safe. So your body is responding as if there is physical danger when there's not. And it's that response that can be cut with practice, breathing techniques, therapy, anxiety reduction tools. Because when we respond to all stressors with that intense physical response, we are actually not allowing our full brain to work on the real problem. Like if there's a problem in a relationship, it really takes long-term thinking, it takes full brain thinking, it takes an understanding of emotion, some assessment of risk, some analysis, conversation, calm conversation that can be heard. It really requires us to be in a relatively unstressed situation, or at least not a peak physiological stressed situation. Let me know if this is making sense. I'd love to know. And Daria from Italy, you're welcome. You're welcome. Nice to see you here. And I did see a few other countries joining in: Puerto Rico, Philippines, Las Vegas, not exactly another country, but almost. Ireland. Yes, so welcome everybody. So understanding this cycle gives you the tools to disconnect that response to the stressor. So I'm going to use one that I've been hearing a lot recently, people who've lost their jobs in the last 6 months. It's a major stress. 100%. It is a stressful thing. It would be very hard to navigate that without some degree of anxiety. And yet, if you are physiologically responding to that stress with that adrenaline and cortisol cycle, that will probably keep you stuck and unable to move forward in a productive way. Now, a little bit of stress, right? A little bit of a stress response to that will help motivate you to do a fairly unpleasant thing of, writing up your resume, sending out letters, spending a couple hours a day looking for a job, right? That is needed when you're unemployed if you want to find a new job. And a certain amount of stress is going to help motivate you to do that. But an extreme stress response is probably going to put you into fight, flight, or freeze mode. So freeze mode, you do nothing. Fight mode, you just stay in the being so PO'd that you got fired, or that this whole pandemic happened, or that somebody was unfair, or something horrible happened, and you could just stay in that fight argument mode, which is not going to move you forward. Or you could be in flight mode, which could be spending lots of time being very busy, doing something totally different, and I'm going to ignore this problem. None of those, fight, flight, or freeze, help with the real situation, which is finding a new job. So again, let me know if this is making sense. Let me know. And welcome Nancy and Steve and the Facebook person from Myanmar. I was there once, actually. I traveled to Myanmar in those days when we could travel. So I also want to come back to my title, and then I do want to do a guided visualization and sort of experiential exercise with you today, because I think that's such a helpful way to really sort of integrate some of these topics. But I first gave a talk on stress reduction in uncertain times, probably right around 2008. And during that time period, I live in Connecticut, and in the Northeast, we had a horrible, horrible market crash. In fact, most of the US did. And real estate prices plummeted. In fact, in many places in Connecticut, they still have not gone back to where they were. A lot of people were unemployed. It was a real major shock to our economic cycle. People felt very, very stressed, very, very uncertain. Not long before that, we had 9/11, clearly a very stressful, horrible event for everybody, really. So I gave the talk then, and people were feeling like times are really, really, really uncertain. And they were. But the truth is, they always are. They always are. So you may have heard me say before, if you've watched a lot of my videos, I would not have wanted to be a female in the Middle Ages in Europe. I think that would have been a horrible place to be. Talk about uncertain whether the children you have are going to survive, even, through childbirth, uncertainty at every single step of the way, and not very good situation for women or for people who didn't, who weren't of a very small percentage of the population. So when have times not been uncertain? And then I think of my father's parents. My father's parents left Ireland when they were about 18 or 19 years old and traveled to the United States. And my grandfather did stay in touch with his family. My grandmother left, never talked about her family, never contacted them, never stayed in touch with them. And it's pretty obvious something horrible had happened. But for them to need to pick up at 18 or 19 years old, get on a steamship, travel across the ocean when they had probably never left their little town. They were all basically potato farmers. life had to be pretty uncertain, right? Everybody was struggling with starvation, actually, at the time. And getting on a boat, coming to a country you've never been before. On the other side of my family, my mother's family, her grandparents all immigrated to the United States. And my grandmother was born in New York, but to a family that only spoke German. They were Hungarian, but the main language that they were speaking was German. So from 0 to 5, she only spoke German, and then ends up in a English-speaking school, and that must have been fairly traumatic for her. So again, when were times not uncertain? So I know that that is not necessarily super helpful, but it does tie to the talk I gave last week, and actually the last few weeks. Last week I talked about really uncertainty and change, right? That whole issue of I hate change, and that things always change. Everything is impermanent. There is something just uncertain about our individual existence, not as uncertain if we have a broader view of things, but uncertainty is a norm. So learning to adapt to uncertainty without that physical stress response is going to make your life much easier. Yeah, and so just what I said about children surviving major heart start racing, somebody just shared. And so that, again, is a physical stress response that's not actually required for talking about the topic. But I understand it happening. So to deal with that is sort of breathing and self-calming. Reading another, people are saying things are making sense, which is great. And then Rob asks, is the pandemic stress anxiety what's making me angry about everything? Just about everything makes me angry. And Mystic is sharing that, yes, it's not their usual way, but everything is making you angry too. Yeah, so anger is an interesting signal, but definitely a lot of stress and anxiety can make us angry because it's that fight response, right? So pick fight, flight, or freeze. What are you doing right now for which topics? So staying in that anger mode, particularly if there's nothing you can actually do about it, is staying in the fight mode. So all of this requires diaphragmatic breathing, being in the moment, utilizing your stress reduction tools and techniques, exercise. When you have that heart rate response to a difficult situation, which I understand because I get it sometimes, go for a run. Release the energy that your body is creating in the way that your body needs to release it. So that's why exercise, aerobic exercise can be really, really good for stress reduction. Because again, we have to think about the difference between what the situation requires and what our body is doing with it. And when the body has that continual stress response, you may not be able to sleep, you might have stomach aches, you might get frequent headaches. There's all sorts of physical responses our bodies will communicate to you that the sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive. And yes, that sympathetic nervous system is what helps us be angry, which sometimes is required and sometimes not. So yes, breathing. Breathing is like my favorite thing, but I know a lot of people kind of might roll their eyes at it. But let's do a little bit of an exercise because I kind of want to sort of help you guys have an experiential exercise that might help you think about this differently. So just like sitting in your chair, just take a deep breath as much as you can into the bottom of your lungs. It helps like to have your stomach go out when you breathe in and then pull your stomach in when you breathe out. So just take a couple of deep diaphragmatic breaths. And you can close your eyes if you like, because this will be a bit of a visualization. If you're more comfortable, keep them open. But after you've taken a couple of diaphragmatic breaths, you can close your eyes. And what I would like you to do is to visualize a container. So visualize a container which has a lid. And then I'm going to ask you to take the 3 biggest problems you have right now. And I know you might have more than 3, but let's just take the 3 biggest problems you have right now and just really take a moment to visualize putting them in the container. Just for a few minutes. Let yourself know that you can take 10 minutes off from these problems and put them in a container, and no major change is going to happen in your life, one way or another. So I'm going to give you a second and really, really picture what that container looks like, what the lid looks like, because we want a lid. We are going to open it sometimes. And then place it somewhere. And just really picture where you are going to place the container. And we're not going to bury it. We want access to it. So this is not going to be a matter of ignoring or dismissing our problems. So hopefully you all have visualized a container. And again, just take a moment to put 3 problems into the container. And while the problems are in the container, take another deep breath. Keep your feet on the floor. Notice your seat in the chair. Take a moment and bring to mind what you can hear other than my voice. If there's something in your room or the atmosphere, just notice what you can hear. And for the few minutes that those problems are in the container, I want you to bring to mind something that's going well right now, something positive in your life. It could even be your health this nanosecond, or the health of somebody that you love, something very simple, the roof over your head. Doesn't have to be complicated. A nice meal you recently had. Just bring to mind a small positive thing. And as you focus on that positive thing, just again for a few minutes, as you focus on that positive thing, notice what happens physiologically. Just notice what's happening in your body and really breathe into that physiological feeling you get when you bring to mind something positive, even if minor. And one reason that I keep saying that it's okay to do this and to leave those problems in the container just for a few minutes is that I know how your anxiety is talking to you. I know that your stress response and your anxiety response is like, yeah, no, I can't stop thinking about that. I can't, no, I gotta keep. So hopefully, just by putting it in the container and knowing it's just gonna be there for a couple of minutes, you can refocus on something positive. And if that's worked for you, let me know. Let me know if something you were able to shift your physiology by focusing on something positive. And Graciela is sharing breathing, yoga, and a lot of exercises helping a lot. Absolutely, me too. I've increased the amount of yoga I'm doing, found a couple of channels I really like. I went out for sort of a run walk this morning. The wind was incredible here, and definitely breathing, yoga, exercise, good stuff. So I'll wait and see if people can post whether they were able to access that sense of physiological calm. And now I'm going to move to something, and again, pay attention physically if anything changes for you when I say something different. So as one of the Facebook users shared that my simply mentioning something made her heart race, just be aware. So Mystic is saying, good exercise, thanks, great. Breathing deeper, longer, smiled, awesome. That helped. I actually thought of a few positive things in your life from different sister. I'm so happy. So know that by doing that, taking a few minutes to put your problems in a container, focus on the positive, you are giving yourself a physiological break. You are allowing that cortisol to come back down. That's stress reduction. And yes, it will go back up later in the day. It might even go back up if I change the topic, right? But just letting that cortisol response drop because you are safe enough now. Nancy felt the relief. Eithne said she is still a bit agitated, but working on it. Yes, it takes practice. It takes practice to change this. So I know I'm actually going to run a little bit long today. So usually I end before 12:30, but there's another piece of this exercise I want to do. So hopefully you can stay on with me. And if not, please come back and watch the replay. So we just did an experiment where we put the 3 problems into a container, focused momentarily on something positive, and felt a physiological stress relief. Good. My recommendation, practice that. Now, the second part of this exercise, and again, notice if something shifts in your body, is to pick one of those problems, and we're going to take it out of the container. So again, you can close your eyes if you like to visualize that way. Bring to mind your container, and you're going to go to it, and you're going to open the container and take just one problem out. Now take that one problem out. It's one of your top 3 problems. And just bring to mind the problem. And notice again if anything is changing for you physically. And if it is, just breathe into it. Try as much as you can to practice staying physiologically calm while you contemplate the problem. So I'm going to give you just a minute to do that. Bringing to mind the problem with a little bit more of a contemplation and some deep breathing to try to keep your physiology calm. So again, I'll be interested if this is working for you, but contemplating the problem while breathing deeply to see if you can see it in a more holistic view. Now, looking at that problem, is there anything you can do today? Is there anything about that problem that you can actually do today? If yes, I'd like you to pick up a pen, piece of paper, and write yourself a little to-do note. This is something I can do today. And how much of that problem are things you're powerless over? And then I can refer you back to the video I did a few weeks ago on powerlessness and accepting what we're powerless over, which can be hugely, hugely helpful. So looking at the problem, what can I do today? And maybe if you want to take it a step further, you could say, okay, what can I do this week? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. Okay, great. Oh, somebody's feeling a headache. Okay, so that's a stress response to the problem. And then someone else is sharing that the problem doesn't seem as daunting now. Perfect, right? So that's what that physiological calming can do. And sometimes the problem will still feel as daunting, but you might have a little more perspective on it. And it probably is not a problem that requires that fight, flight, freeze response. If it's a problem that requires fight, flight, freeze, you wouldn't be sitting here listening to a video. You'd be going to the hospital, you'd be calling 911, you'd be running. So again, I'm just trying to really help you differentiate between the problems that are real. Not dismissing that. And the physiological response your body is having, which is almost like an outdated response. It's almost like our appendix. Like, we don't really need that response for most of our problems. Most of the problems we face today require full brain thinking. So, contemplating the problem, noting, is there anything I can do today? And then you could also say, okay, is there anything I can do this week? So I'm going to share a couple of examples. So, unemployed, lost your job due to COVID, panic response will have you do nothing. Thinking about it with the full brain, you might say, okay, today I can ask a friend to look at my resume. I can work on my resume. I can pull up one of the job sites and take a look for some jobs. I can make a couple of networking calls. I can call 3 people this afternoon who are in the field I used to be in, try to begin some kind of informational interviewing, networking. And all of those things might make you feel a little bit anxious. I get it. Looking for a job can be very anxiety provoking. But if there are steps you can take, that's what you want to focus on. So hopefully that makes some sense. So the election, I just want to mention the election in the United States, because literally people are contacting me and saying, like, I can't sleep. I'm so worried about what might happen. And believe me, I have very strong opinions about this topic. However, I am also well aware that my anxiety stress response will not help in any way. On some level, I am very powerless over the outcome of the election. On another level, there are things I can do. I can make sure I'm registered to vote. I can make sure I have asked for my mail-in ballot. I could volunteer with one of the organizations which is helping people register and get mail-in ballots. I could donate money to a candidate I support. So those are all actions I can take that will have a ripple effect, right? Every action we take has a ripple effect. Does it accomplish what we want at the end of the day? We're not in total control. But to focus on what we can control and to take steps towards what we can control is hugely empowering and really, really good for our stress response and for our self-esteem, and for us to be able to, at the end of the day, be like, okay, I did what I could. I did what I could. So I'm going to come back to a couple of questions by Rob and come back about the meds. So Charles, I'm not sure, but I think Charles, I'm on meds. I don't feel anything anymore, but still working on techniques and practicing self-care. Well, meds can sometimes numb us out. Yes. So we do lose access to some of the body feelings. And yet, if you're watching this video, you probably are aware that you are feeling stress. So maybe tuning into, how do you know that you're feeling stress? Right? Because I do hear that a lot from people, where they'll feel like meds have made them feel numb, which is problematic, right? Because our feelings are a signal to us, but sometimes they're too overwhelming and we do need the meds to help with it. Yet, even those people who feel like they're numb, how do they know they're numb? Like, how do you know you're numb? How do you know you're not feeling your feelings? And how do you know you're feeling stress? So just an exploration, just taking the time to explore. And probably no matter what, these tools of self-care, these tools of focusing on the positive, breaking, contemplating problems in a way where I can split out what I'm powerless over and what I do have power over, and then coming up with a couple of steps of things I can do today, and really keeping it. So the one day at a time is a wonderful, wonderful stress reduction tool. It's one of my favorites. One day at a time. What can I do today about this problem? So I hope that this has been useful. Right, so Alan is having a bit of the fight response about why governments aren't protecting us, and I understand. I understand. And is there something you can do on that right now? And if could be writing a letter to your local paper, to your local politician, it could be donating to a politician who might do a better job with this. It could be just simply taking care of yourself. Is the stress response going to help that problem? I think that's really at the end of the day, these are major issues, and Alan, I'm in total agreement with you, total. But is my physiological stress response going to impact that? And if not, I'm actually harming my own health by allowing myself to get deeper and deeper and deeper into anger and upset and anxiety over the problem. So what can I do about it today? What am I willing to do about it? And that can be the focus. Thank you so much. Thanks for sticking in there with me and hanging on. I really appreciate it. And I will check in with your comments later and hopefully see you guys all next week. Bye.